Always sounds very, very dire when you say that. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about we had been talking a little bit about Shabbat, and I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of because the Beit Din, a lot of times is concerned. Do people know kind of what a regular Shabbat looks like? What goes into preparing for Shabbat? Obviously, there's very technical questions that they often ask, which is about heating up food on Shabbat or things like that. But it can be confusing because, all of a sudden, you throw into somebody's life the idea that you can't cook, and you can't really use fire, and you can't use electricity. So it's you sort of the question is, how do you? I can imagine being in those shoes and sort of wondering, well, how does it work then? How do I do that? How do you, on a practical level, make Shabbat work? And so I wanted to address that a little bit. There's an interesting piece of Talmud. Start with something theoretical. Obviously, Shabbat, goes back to the very beginning of Bereshit, the very beginning of the Torah. And we can take a quick look at that. Okay, so obviously Shabbat goes all the way back to the beginning of the. Now it's interesting in a certain funny way. Shabbat, in a way, appears before the Jewish people appear, right? I mean, that's interesting that you have this sort of commandment about Shabbat, and right, God creates the world, and then the end of the first chapter, God creates the human being, and it was the sixth day, right? And then the Torah tells us, and this you'll recognize from the Kiddush that we say on Shabbat. God finished the heavens and the earth and all of its. Sabah actually is connected to the word for army. Sabah is an army in modern Hebrew. Sabah means usually translated in Bibles as hosts, all their hosts. But it means everything in there. And God finished the work. It's connected to the word Vaychulu and Vaychal, very similar. They were finished. God finished on the seventh day the work that God did and rested on the seventh day from all the work that God did. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. Kivo Shabbat, because on it God rested from all the work, Asher bara, which God created, la'asot, to do. It's a little bit strange, but that's the language of Shabbat. And then you have sort of the second paragraph. That's all we have right here. Shabbat appears in several places. It appears here. It appears in the. It certainly appears a lot of places in the Torah. It appears where the Torah talks about the Mishkan, the tabernacle. What we're reading right now in the synagogue, the Shabbat is always next to the tabernacle because, as we mentioned before, the not allowed to build the tabernacle on Shabbat, and all the things you're not allowed to do on Shabbat come from the process of building the tabernacle. Then you have it in the Ten Commandments. 10 Commandments are written twice in the Torah. So you have it in both of those places. Then you have it again later on in the book of Midbar, Numbers, probably in Devarim also. And in some places, the Shabbat is about the world. Right here, it's about the world. Some places, the Shabbat is about the Jewish people coming out of Egypt. So it's in memory of both the creation of the world and it's in memory of the going out of Egypt. In different places in the Torah. And in another place, the Shabbat is all about a social model. in which your servants have to rest, your animals have to rest, your children have to rest. And the Torah says, in order that your servants and your animals will rest like you, that if the master doesn't rest, so then nobody else is going to rest. It's a social undertaking, that it should be a kind of society in which work is not obsessive, in which there's a seventh day. And it's an interesting question, obviously, why does God have to rest, right? This is not a kind of rest from tiredness. You keep Shabbat even if you're not tired, right? There's some kind of stopping of creating, of making things in the world, of impact in the world, that somehow is very vital. And what is Shabbat really? It's right. It's interesting, the language here. Asher bara Elokim. In the first chapter, what we just read. Sorry. Asher bara Elokim lasot, which God created to do. In fact, some of the commentaries say that Shabbat itself is a creation, not just the day of not doing at all. It's something else. It is something positive. It's something, there's an engagement with Shabbat. Interesting. So what about preparing for Shabbat, right? So obviously in one place in the Ten Commandments, you have two different words, right? You have the Ten Commandments in Exodus, you have Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy, in Shemot and Devarim. One place it says remember the Shabbat, one place it says guard the Shabbat. Guard the Shabbat we understand to be all the things that you don't do on Shabbat, all the things you can't do. Remember the Shabbat is all the positive things. And that is the things that you have to prepare for Shabbat. Special clothing, special food, special. It's interesting that the word associated with Shabbat is the oneg, pleasure. And it's sort of surprising. You would think that a spiritual day would be more ascetic, would be less about your own personal pleasure, and yet your personal pleasure in the right context is the focus of Shabbat in a certain way. It's interesting. In the synagogue, I talked about the other day how the Mishkan is a way of creating active intimacy with God. Service. There's a kind of servitude in a relationship, but Shabbat is a kind of intimacy in a relationship in which just being is an intimate act. And if people are really in love, then just being with each other is an intimate act. You don't have to actually do something together. And that's Shabbat, right? So the Shabbat of just being is not actually just being. It's being in relationship with God. It's spiritual, even though, and it's perplexing because it's all very physical. It's called oneg, pleasure. I'll read you an interesting piece from the Talmud. The Gemara in Beit. Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a Braita, Braita is like a Mishnah. Amru alav al Shammai hazaken. They said about Shammai, right? There's two very famous rabbis who used to constantly argue with each other thousands of times throughout the Talmud. That is Hillel and Shammai, or the houses of Hillel and the houses of Shammai, the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. It's taught in the Braita. They said about Shammai the elder that all of his days he would eat in honor of the Shabbat. If he found a nice animal that he could slaughter, he would say, "This is for Shabbat." And then if he found another one later in the week that was better than that one, he would put aside the second one for Shabbat and eat the first one. And this way, the Talmud says, he was Kol Yamav Ochel Lechavod Shabbat. All his days he ate in the honor of Shabbat. In other words, on Tuesday, he's eating in the honor of Shabbat. Why? Because he's eating the food on Tuesday that he's put aside, that he's eating because he found something better for Shabbat. I assume if he only found something good for Shabbat and he never found something better to replace it with, maybe he didn't eat. But all of his eating during the week was in a certain sense sanctified because it was about Shabbat. Why am I eating this? I'm eating this because I got something better for Shabbat. So now I got to eat this so it doesn't go bad. And the other thing I put aside. So everything he did was about getting ready for Shabbat all week. Now Hillel, who always argues with Shammai, it's interesting. You would think that makes a lot of sense. It seems very religious. But Hillel the elder, the Talmud says, Mida acheret haytalo. He had a different midah, a different characteristic. He had a different vision for how to be a spiritual person. Shekol ma'asav l'shem shamayim. All of his deeds were for the sake of heaven. As it says, Baruch Hashem yom yom, blessed is God every day. And we learned also, Beis Shammai said, he used a different verse, a verse that said, all of your week should be for Shabbat. And Beis Hillel said, no, every day you should bless God. So what did Hillel do? What's going on over here, right? The Talmud says Shammai did this whole thing because he said, your whole week is for Shabbat. And so the whole week he would spend deciding, which food's for Shabbat, trying to get better food for Shabbat. But that's not what Hillel did, the Talmud says. Hillel did something different. All of his actions were for the sake of heaven. As it says, blessed is God every day. So what's the Talmud saying? What's Hillel? How are their visions different? You can just yell out.
Maybe it's distinguishing between like good and then better. Like every day should be like blessed by God, but Shabbat is like, it's a little bit elevated.
Right. I mean, I'm sure Hillel believed Shabbat was, on some level more elevated than Tuesday. But what did they do different? In other words, if Shammai always, he'd be looking for better food for Shabbat, and then he would eat the first one and use the second one for Shabbat, the better one for Shabbat. But the Talmud says Hillel didn't do that. Why didn't Hillel do that? Like, what's his vision of blessing God, right? And the Talmud says Hillel conducted himself with not your whole week is for Shabbat, but blessed is God every day. So how do you think Hillel prepared for Shabbat? He obviously did not prepare for Shabbat the way Shammai prepared for Shabbat, because the Talmud says Hillel did it differently. And it was based on this different vision of blessed is God every day. Does Shammai not believe blessed is God every day? At least with regard to this, no. With regard to this, he believes your whole week is for Shabbat. It's different than blessed is God every day. So I'm imagining that Hillel prepared for Shabbat probably the way we prepare for Shabbat. Right? On Wednesday or Thursday, he said, okay, what am I going to do for Shabbat? And he went shopping and he prepared for Shabbat. That's not what Shammai did, right? Now, it's for Shammai, his whole week is about Shabbat. Now, is it bad that for Hillel, his whole week is not about Shabbat, that he starts preparing for Shabbat on Thursday? What about Tuesday? What about Wednesday? The answer is he thinks Tuesday and Wednesday stand on their own, that you can bless God on Tuesday and Wednesday. You eat whatever you have on Tuesday and Wednesday and bless God. That's a whole Tuesday and Wednesday could be a holy. In a certain sense, Shammai doesn't believe that Tuesday and Wednesday can be holy in and of their own, in and of themselves. But he believes that they get their holiness from Shabbat. Tuesday and Wednesday are about Shabbat. But Hillel doesn't think that. And that's not that Hillel respects Shabbat any less. It's just that in a way, he doesn't want to, do you know Buber's famous distinction of I and it? That he said everybody should be an end in themselves. Everybody should be a thou. Everybody should be not an it. When you make something, what does it mean to make something an it or someone an it? It means that you actually want them as a means to an end. Every human has to be an end in themselves. They can't be a means to an end. For Shammai, is Tuesday a means to an end, or is it an end in itself? It's a means to an end, Shabbat. And it's supposed to be. That's Shammai's vision. Hillel doesn't think that. Hillel thinks Tuesday needs to be an end in itself. It needs to be Tuesday. You have to figure out how to bless God on Tuesday. It can't be that Tuesday's holy because of Shabbat. Right? That's what it seems like. Doesn't mean he respected Shabbat any less. So he didn't get ready. I'm sure he got ready for Shabbat on Thursday, Friday, whatever it was. So, I think there's value to both of these. I think I think the fact that Shabbat in many ways in many ways, Orthodox life for observant Jews, Jewish life for Orthodox Jews revolves around Shabbat. It's true, like in a lot of times I feel like in the community here, you invite somebody for a Shabbat meal on, a week before on Sunday, they're like, no, I'm already booked. You got to get people 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. It's like they're thinking about Shabbat. Where am I going to eat on Shabbat? Who am I going to be with for Shabbat? So there's beauty to that. That it revolves around it. But it's interesting that Talmud has 2 opinions about this. That Rashi says. I should point out that when Shammai would eat something during the week, he's eating it so he can use the other one for Shabbat. Right? All of his eating during the week is about Shabbat. That's interesting. Different for Hillel. Okay. So that's sort of the theoretical side. I wanted to look also at some halachic material, some Jewish law. This is from the Panini Halacha book that I like very much, Rabbi Eliyahu Muhammad, since it's free and it's in both Hebrew and English online. And he has a section here about Shabbat, introduction, preparing for Shabbat, Shabbat times, candlelighting, laws of Kiddush, got all kinds of Jewish law. So he writes, you can see that he's thinking about this piece of Talmud, I think. It says the 6 weekdays in Shabbat are interconnected. Just as one has a body and a soul, so too the week has a body, the work days, and the soul, Shabbat. Just as a wholesome person's body and soul work together harmoniously, the body receives spiritual inspiration from the soul, in turn serves as the vehicle for the soul's expression. So too an ideal week is one in which Shabbat and the weekdays are closely linked. During the week we prepare for Shabbat, thus elevating and sanctifying the weekdays which draw the value from Shabbat. Now that sounds kind of like Shammai. Here we go. Sages recount that Shammai would always eat on every Shabbat. When he saw a fine animal, he would say, this is for Shabbat. Found a better one, he would be that one and eat the other one. In other words, all week he would eat lower quality food, always saving the best for Shabbat. In this way, whenever he ate, he honored Shabbat and considered how he would honor and sanctify it. Hillel possessed a different trait. All his actions were undertaken for the greater glory of God. He would make a point of honoring and sanctifying the weekdays as well as Shabbat, thus fulfilling the mandate to bless God every day. Therefore, when good food came his way during the week, he would eat it, trusting that just as God had made sure he had good food during the week, he would make sure that he had better food for the Holy Shabbat. He'll honor and value each day. That was not so easy, by the way, probably in the old days. It's not like us where we live in the United States and we know that when we go to the store, there's going to be food. So I remember during the pandemic, I went to Trader Joe's once and I was like, and all the shelves were empty. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like shocking for an American, So probably in history, that was often true, so it probably took a lot of faith to be Hillel, by the way. According to halachic authorities, even Hillel agreed that for most people, it's preferable to act like Shammai and doesn't make the best food for Shabbat. However, Hillel's trust in God was exceptional. He was certain God would provide him with better food for Shabbat. One who does not possess this degree of faith must follow Shammai, interesting, and honor Shabbat by designating the best food for Shabbat. Nowadays, this law is almost irrelevant. There's a vast selection of food in temporary supermarkets all the time. No reason to think that if you eat something during the week, it's not going to be left. You won't be able to get it for Shabbat. He says here, while shopping for Shabbat, it's most proper to articulate that this shopping is to honor the holy Shabbat, thus fulfilling the commandment of remembering Shabbat. Also, good to taste the food being prepared for Shabbat in order to make sure it's good. This piece about Friday. A certain amount of preparation for Shabbat should go on all week. Primary time to prepare is Friday. It says on the 6th day they prepared what they had brought in. That's talking about the manna in the desert. Just in the desert, first thing Friday morning, Jews gathered manna that had fallen the previous night, so it's a mitzvah to be industrious to prepare for Shabbat on Friday morning. There's an admirable custom for women to wake up early, men too, to bake challah and bread for Shabbat. I'm the one who bakes the bread in my house for Shabbat. And perform the mitzvah of hafrashat challah. Do you know what hafrashat challah is? Hafrasha means to set aside. The word challah we sometimes use to mean this Eastern European bread that has eggs in it and honey in it or sugar in it. We call that challah, and people think it's Jewish, but it's really not. It's an Eastern European bread, and it was better than other breads. The Jews ate it on Shabbat. The word challah in the Torah refers to the piece of bread that when you make bread, if you make enough of it, it has to be several pounds of flour, you pull off a little piece, and in the time of the temple, you would have given it to the Kohen, to the priest. Today, obviously, we don't have a Kohen, but you do make a blessing when you do it. And today, we just take a little piece and we burn it in memory of that. Usually, burn it in the oven or something. But that's what challah really. If you look in the Bible, in the Torah, you'll see that's what challah is. Somehow Jews came to call all bread challah for Shabbat, even though there's a mitzvah. But whenever you make bread, about a weekday, whatever it is, you have to take challah if you made enough of it. Those mitzvah shop early on Friday one should do so. Okay. It also says in the Talmud, each rabbi had like certain jobs they would do for Shabbat in their house. This is interesting. It says, you're faced with two possibilities: cooking all day on Friday, being exhausted Friday night, or cooking on Thursday, refrigerating the food, and doing Shabbat combination food on Thursday. Okay. It says, it's a holy custom to finish all your Shabbat preparations by midday on Friday and then to rest and study Torah in the afternoon. Probably not so common today. I feel like everybody's always rushed till the end. Yeah, Kate.
I have a question about the 2 loaves of bread or challah or whatever you have. So I've read that you're supposed to have 2 loaves for the first and the second meal, the Friday night meal and the Saturday meal.
Yeah.
But I know some people just break the loaf in half, and that's considered. You can just have 2 loaves with that first loaf. No,
so you should have 2 whole loaves for each meal on Shabbat, for the Friday night and the Shabbat morning meal.
Okay.
For Sudash, usually the third meal you don't need. Now, whether, and as long as you bake and they get kind of connected, so if they're meant to be 2 different loaves, that's okay to pull them apart. But
is there a reason for breaking a loaf in half or cutting it down the middle? Is there?
You mean after you make the blessing on it?
Yeah, when you're, yeah.
Is
that just a custom?
Yeah, I think you could cut it however you want.
Okay.
You mean you've seen people make it on 2 whole loaves, and then they cut a whole loaf in half and then cut it into pieces?
Yeah.
That's just a way of doing it.
Yeah,
some people tear it, like they just tear it and give it.
Yeah, this is my wife, Sarah, by the way. I don't know if everybody knows her.
Hi. Hi, Sarah.
A lot of folks on here. Let me stop sharing so you can all see.
Hi. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah.
Nice to see you too.
So I thought, because we're kind of talking about preparation for Shabbat, that even though we're both involved in preparation for Shabbat, for me, my job in life is a Jewish job. So although I'm actually very busy on Fridays, but Sarah works, although she works in the Jewish community, she works more in the world than I. And I thought that might be a good thing to talk a little bit about, for her to just talk generally about whatever she wants about Shabbat. But also some of you may be faced with the dilemma of, how do I do a regular job and get ready for Shabbat? That's not always so obvious. So maybe she'll talk a little bit and then take questions about Shabbat preparation. I'm happy to also. Let me give her the big chair.
What did you want? You were going to tell the Gemara.
I did already.
Oh, I was late.
Yeah.
I'm late to the party. Sorry. Hi. Okay, so okay, so I'm Sarah, for those of you that I haven't met, and I feel like the way I prepare for Shabbat sort of changes, and it changes a little bit based on where I am in my life and what is going on in my life. So I just want to sort of give a couple examples of how I make it work. I think the first thing to say is I didn't grow up observant. So I grew up, many times we had a Shabbat dinner together, but there was nothing like having to prepare before Shabbat. It was not the same experience as being an Orthodox Jew. So when I met my husband, when we were dating, we were not married, he would come to my apartment and clean my apartment and cook for Shabbat. And I was like, this is amazing. But I didn't realize that someday I'd be doing that. So it was a big learning curve. So I just told him I did that. So anyways, and I didn't know how to cook at all when I my husband, and because I didn't keep kosher, I ate out all the time. So it was a culture shift for me to, once I started keeping kosher, I wanted to eat good food. And if I wanted to eat good food, I had to learn to cook it. So I taught myself to cook. I mean, that was really the bottom line. I have friends who never cook. They order from the same place again and again, and they don't mind. Like, they're happy. They think it's great. So catered food is great if you have the resources and you're okay, ordering. In the pandemic, Shalom's does a packaged meal that's really reasonably priced that delivers down here, and I get that a lot more than I ever did before. But when I'm trying to cook for myself, I also feel like part of the whole experience of living this observant life is hosting people at my house or going to other people's homes. So we try to host. You do have to kind of think in advance. Like, I find here people are invited out like more than a week in advance. That we're not so good at that. I'm lucky if I invite people on Sunday for the next Friday. But so you have to think about, like, am I going to invite people? How many people are going to invite? What are their allergies going to be? Like, you have to sort of so there is a lot of thought that goes into the preparation of what I love, a challenge of having different allergies and different dietary restrictions and having to figure out a meal that works for everybody. But most people do not like that. I'm a little crazy. So you may want to think twice about who you invite and make sure you can fit a menu in that works for them. But I do think that they're, just thinking through like in advance. So if I know my week is crazy, I mean, the easiest thing to do is cook Thursday night. Okay, so shopping Wednesday night, cooking Thursday night, and then only having to do last minute Friday prep after work. I mean, obviously in the summer, it's different. Like, Shabbat starts so much later. You could really, I could work a full day, go to the grocery store and cook a dinner and be ready for Shabbat. So it a little bit depends on the time of the year. But it does require a little bit of organization skills just in terms of preparing the stuff in advance. I feel like there was one other thing I was going to say, but I don't remember. I don't know. So I don't know if that's helpful. I'm happy. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, this is more about hosting for Shabbat. So then there's like preparation, like you got to get the food, you got to get the paper goods or the plates or whatever, you got to set the table. So we had this friend in St. Louis who we went over to their house for Shabbat, and she said, I'm trying to be more like you. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? She goes, I'm trying to not be prepared when my guests come over. And she meant it as a compliment. I was like, oh, because basically, if you shouldn't feel like everything has to be ready when people come. Like, people are happy to pitch in and help. And she felt like the fact that she would come to my house and she had to set the table or she had to make a salad made her feel part of the meal experience. So that was just a very funny left-handed compliment, but I took it to mean that people do like to have a role. So it's great to do potlucks. It's great to ask people to bring things to your home. If you want to invite people to your home, like you want to invite your friends from work that aren't Jewish, there's plenty of things they can pick up that can be helpful. Having them pick up a packaged dessert, having them bring drinks, having them make a fruit salad. Like, there's ways that people can contribute even if they don't keep kosher. But then also, potlucks are great with your friends too. So those kind of things. That was, I think, that.
I would sort of bring up, like, in a way, I guess, if, unless you grow up with it, it seems a little weird to have like 2 meals ready before Friday night. Let's say you're not going somewhere for one of the meals. So, like, how do you, then you have to, of course, think about what is that food? How do you warm it up? What are the options? But in a way, it seems like a lot of cooking. It's not just Friday night.
Right. So the easiest thing to do, especially if it's just you or a couple of people, is to make the same thing for Friday night and Saturday. If you're like me, I don't want to eat the same thing for Friday night and Saturday, so I have to make 2 meals in advance. So that does require more work. But remember, whenever you're warming up Saturday, this is how I always think about it. I always make my Saturday meal first because you're warming up anyways. It has to be made up in advance. But if I want to serve roasted vegetables, they're going to taste substantially better if I make them right before Shabbat versus a day before.
For Friday night.
And then eat them Friday night, right? But if you're going to be eating it for Saturday anyways, I make that further in advance. So I do try to do like both meals meat or both meals dairy, because that makes it just simpler in terms of the amount of things I have left over Friday night I can serve for Saturday lunch, although I've been known to do. And then when you get to Yom Tov, that's even more complicated. But start with Shabbat. That's
right. More complicated and less, maybe, because you can cook on Yom Tov. It's not Shabbat.
I know you have to put food in your house.
That's true. And if you guys have questions, really feel free to ask for her, for me, for both of us.
I had some minor questions. So you mentioned that like you try and do a lot of the stuff Thursday, and then like you said, final touches on Friday. I would be curious if you had like specific examples of what the kind of the final touches are on Friday, that like the last things you're doing. Did you guys freeze?
Yeah, we
froze.
froze.
Yeah, try it again.
Okay. All right. You just mentioned you try to do a lot Thursday, ideally, and then finishing touches on Friday. I would be curious, like kind of the specifics, if everything's going according to plan, what are the kind of final touches those Friday, before as Shabbat's kind of coming in, what are those final touches that you're doing at the end, if that makes sense?
Right. So if I'm hosting or making food for Friday night, I like to have I just always make a lot of roasted vegetables, and I think those taste better cooked fresh. So I usually, like, if I can, well, with my job, I've been able to work from home on Fridays, so I can kind of roast vegetables aren't very time consuming. I mean, it takes a long time, but it's not a lot of active time. So I can be working on my computer and have vegetables roasting, and every 20 minutes it beeps and I take them in and put the vegetables out, or even roast a chicken. So that is the kind of thing I would save until right before, whereas like a pot of rice doesn't really matter if I make it Thursday night. Soups, I always make Thursday nights. And if I'm gonna make challah or dessert, I would do that Thursday night.
Do you find yourself like racing up until the last minute, or is like, do you have a goal of like, okay, like 30 minutes before lighting the candles, I want to be done with everything, or an hour? I find like sometimes I'm like frantically trying to have everything done, and then that kind of puts me in this like rushed mindset going into Shabbat that isn't as enjoyable as the times where I'm able to like make that back. I'd be curious if you're able to accomplish that.
No.
Okay.
It doesn't matter how organized I am and what time Shabbat starts, it's always crazy. And part of that is because and this just might be a Sarah personality thing, like I fill the time there is. I'm like, oh, I could get that ready now. I could do this. Oh, I could do that. Because I'd much rather have it all done before Shabbat, so that when Shabbat hits, I can be like, take a deep breath, go to shul, sit down, relax. Like I want that. So I'll do everything, even if it's stuff I could do on Shabbat. Like if I have an extra 10 minutes, I'll be like, oh, I'll set the table. I could set the table on Shabbat, but if I could get it done and then I could relax and have a few more minutes to daven or to read a book, I would rather do that.
So you're gonna have your guests do that.
Okay, well, that's what sometimes
But that is a good thing, that often there is a little bit of time, right? Especially if you're going to shul, you got an hour between when you're done and when you're eating. So there's some reset time.
Right. I mean, I wish that I didn't, but I mean, many times, like, so I would like to say I'm the person that does everything early, but most of the time I'm making a salad after Shabbat starts. I don't know what I do I feel like all those little plating things and putting like little appetizers out and all that stuff I end up doing after setting the table, after candlelighting, because I'm not organized enough.
And you know what? Like there's things that like you have to do before Shabbat, and like I won't remember. So we had a list on the fridge for years that said like, make sure there's hot water in the hot water thing in the urn, and it's plugged in, it's all ready, and make sure you set the oven this way. And
the light of the fridge off.
Yeah, and turn on the lights that you need on for Shabbat, and like it makes sense to have lists like that, so that you look at it.
So if you don't mind, one kind of follow up. It doesn't necessarily have to do with preparation for Shabbat, but like along like similar line of like all this stuff to do. Like I always find I am an extrovert. I do like hanging out with people. I have been trying to like find a little bit of space in Shabbat for myself also to kind of like reflect, maybe like study. And I always find that I'm just completely consumed by shul, dinner. The dinner goes till midnight, and then you go to sleep, and then you wake up for services, and then you go to lunch, and lunch goes to like 4 o'clock, like, or 5 o'clock, right? And you can't leave because no one's benched yet. So like, and then like, I just find like, and it's great, and I am having a great time and I'm learning so much, but like I am struggling personally to try and carve out a piece of Shabbat for myself, for kind of like my own spiritual kind of like self-reflection stuff. So I was curious if you guys were able to do that. I'm assuming that you guys especially probably are really busy on Shabbat, and maybe you don't, but I'd be curious if you had any advice of how to make some time for yourself.
A great question.
It's a great question. I do think it's a dilemma, and it's funny in some ways. I would say being married gives us a different, I mean, obviously he's the route. We try very hard. I mean, all the years when my kids were home, we tried hard to only host for one meal. So that one meal was just our family. So that one meal was like a casual, we could have some space. I think if you're single, it might feel different. Like if you want to have a whole meal by yourself, that's great. But you may feel like, oh, I want to be with other people for a meal. And then you kind of get roped in. But you can say to people, I really want to come for lunch, but I need to leave by X time. Is it a problem if we bench a little early? Because
Yeah,
I need a little space, because whatever. Like that's
Yeah, I mean, if it's the time of year when Friday nights are very late, so maybe you only go out for, a meal during the day. And if it's time of year when days are really short, maybe you'll go at night. Or maybe you do that every other week, or, I mean, I know as a young professional, it could be hard because in an Orthodox community, a lot of one's social life is revolving around Shabbat. But I'm especially glad you brought it up because, I think there's a dilemma in the Orthodox community sometimes that religious life becomes very much, there's even this term for it, social orthodoxy, that there's somehow the spirituality is gets pushed aside, by all the social part. And I, in a way, I think that people who do not grow up with it can really kind of bring some of that spirituality. I'm not putting pressure on you, but can sort of bring some spirituality to, I think, the modern Orthodox community, which is sometimes, lacking it. Because people grow up more with, sort of Talmud study and do this and don't do that. And Shabbat can become, sort of very social.
Yeah, and I want to add, I mean, and I feel like, and this doesn't really help you, Gabe, but as a woman, I take advantage of the fact that I'm not obligated in prayer. So usually I pray before I go to synagogue, which sounds counterintuitive, but I feel like I spend half my time at shul, like helping, I mean, partly I think because my role, because I'm married to Chaim, but I'm trying to help people. I'm helping set up Kiddush, I'm doing that and this, and I'm like, I'm more focused at home for 20 minutes or a half hour before I go than when I go, so that is different, I think, for women than men.
Tom, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. So Shabbat is
Hi,
not
Tom.
tradition, but sort of by osmosis, I guess. But at any rate, my question is this: a few months ago, some neighbors invited us for dinner on Friday, and they said, we're having Shabbat, come for dinner. And so there were 4 couples, 2 Jewish, 2 not. And I was very excited because I thought, this is my first Shabbat dinner. I can't wait to see what happens. And we had a wonderful evening, and the food was fantastic. But and I don't think our hosts were observant necessarily. But it was, quote, billed as Shabbat dinner. And so was I missing something other than good fellowship and great food?
Was there any ritual aspect to it?
No, there wasn't. See, that's my thing.
Oh, Tom, we better have you over. We
Yeah.
need to have you for Shabbat.
Yeah, there's obviously a very wide range in Judaism from, observant to not so observant. Sounds like you're on the not so observant end of the spectrum there.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. I mean, typically, obviously, a Shabbat meal would have Kiddush said over wine.
Right.
It'd be a paragraph from the Bible about God sanctifying the Shabbat and a blessing about sanctifying the Shabbat. And then bread, 2 loaves of bread.
We may have had 2 loaves of challah.
Okay, yeah, and there's a blessing that you say. And then also, the typical Shabbat meal in the observant community, I mean, there are, words of Torah about the Torah portion usually that are discussed. The Talmud says if you eat a meal and you don't speak words of Torah, that's like a sort of idolatrous thing. And obviously there's a grace after meals that's pretty long in the observant tradition. There's also Shabbat songs, all these songs that were written, many of them in the Sephardic world during the early medieval period. And they're, printed in those Shabbat benches and Shabbat in books for Shabbat. And people sing those, people sit, I mean, it's funny for an American, like we're all going to sit and we're going to sing a song in another language now in the middle of this meal. Right? Probably is strange for somebody who's not used to that, but in the observer, like I grew up that way, forever. I mean, that's how it was. Of course, the Shaddai used that, and that's considered a very sort of holy undertaking. Yeah.
We used to sing Frere Jacques at dinner when I was a kid.
Really?
It was a different era. Yeah.
Hi, yeah, these are all really good questions, and mine is very mundane in comparison. So you put food on the blech, so you have warm food, let's say when you get back from shul, right? And it's been there for a couple of hours, and it's warm, but it's not hot. Have you ever heard, and if I was curious, have you ever heard of like food safety issues with keeping food
Good question.
for a number of hours?
So it depends on your hot plate, on what you're using. Like I find actually that when you buy the ones that are made for Shabbat, either in Israel or on Amazon, that they're actually very hot.
Mhm.
And that we have to put like a cookie tray upside down on top of it so it doesn't burn. And if the food's fully cooked from before, it's okay to put it on there, even though it's so hot. We've never had a food safety issue. I think because even though the food's not getting very hot right away, it's not that long. It's maybe 2-3 hours. Even if you take, chicken out of the fridge and put it on a plot on a hot plate,
We've never had a problem. It's a magic of
Yeah.
Shabbat.
There you go.
No, Rosh Hashanah though, like you leave it on there a long time, and I always think about it, but I don't know anyone that's ever had a problem.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but so I can ask, am I, if it's solid food that's already been cooked, you don't have to leave it on, right? You can put it on.
No,
before the
right.
meal.
You would, right. And that's what he's talking about, putting it on Shabbat morning at 9 a.m.
It's just the liquid that you'd have to keep from cooling down.
Right. Generally, there is a difference, by the way, between Ashkenaz and Sephardic Jews, but right, in general, people do not. It could be that there are Sephardic Jews who do put liquids on, certain kinds of liquids, but yeah, right. So, right, you wouldn't take a liquid out of the fridge and heat it up on Shabbat during the day. Now you could, Jews typically make this thing called cholent, which is a kind of stew that you put either in an oven or a crock pot, and you even, you cook it a certain amount before Shabbat, then you leave it in there for, from the beginning of Shabbat until your daytime meal, which, could be 20 hours. And it's fine. It works well that way. We actually do that sometimes with soup even. Like we'll make soup before Shabbat. It doesn't have to just be cholent, which is usually made out of beans, potatoes, and meat. But like Sephardic Jews have a rice version of cholent called hamim. And it's very different, tastes very different. It's got like cinnamon and it's got like all these Sephardic spices. And so there's a lot of different versions of what you can put either in a slow cooker or, leave in an oven, or on if your hot plate's very hot, you could do, I've seen people make cholent on a hot plate. But yeah, like sometimes we do it a lot with soup actually. We'll make soup, and then if it's in a crock pot on low or a slow cooker on low or in an instant pot on slow cook, it's fine. And it's usually good for Shabbat day. Now obviously for Friday night, you can put stuff in your oven as long as it's cooked before Shabbat. If it's in your oven, that's fine. You program your oven to shut off. You can turn your oven higher and then shut it off so it's still hot in there. And then you can take it out of your oven on Shabbat. We don't usually put stuff into an oven to heat up on Shabbat because of a rabbinic decree that it might look like you're cooking.
I have a question on the blech. So I have a Israeli version, and I came home last Shabbat and I had put something on it like before I left that morning, and the blech still wasn't hot. And so all of the food was like kind of lukewarm, and I was wondering if you've had problems with.
It did yeah. So by the way, I just want to make one distinction. The word blech is a Yiddish word, and it usually refers to a piece of metal that covers a flame on a stove. So the sort of modern Israeli invention of a plug-in hot plate that usually does not have a knob to adjust the heat is called a plata. Just so you know. or a plata shabbat, which
Although I always call it the
Hebrew means a
wrong
hot
thing.
plate.
I think other
people do, people
too.
mix it up, but it's good to know what you're referring to. So you're probably all talking about a plug-in electric hot plate called in Hebrew a plata shabbat. So you're finding that yours is not very hot.
So I had it in on Friday, and then before I left for shul on Saturday morning, I put a few like food, like pans of food.
Did it feel hot at the time?
On plata. Well, yeah, it felt hot, but I guess it wasn't hot enough. And then I think,
Yeah,
I don't know, it like cooled off. And then later that day it heated up again and it was really hot.
Did it have a timer on it?
No, it's just you plug it in and unplug it and that's it. There's like
It sounds like maybe either it wasn't plugged in all the way and maybe it got jiggled and plugged in all the way.
Yeah,
Or maybe you have a loose wire in it or something.
maybe.
That doesn't sound normal.
Yeah, I would test it,
I don't know. Ours is very hot, like
yeah.
almost too hot.
We ordered ours on Amazon way back, but there's other places you can order them online too.
Okay.
And you can put it on a timer. No, I do that.
Yeah, I just bought Shabbat timers or just timers.
Yeah, timers.
So I'm gonna try them out.
Yeah, I mean, you can put lights on timers. You can.
Did you show them our Shabbat bowl?
Oh yeah, did you ever? Let me show you this. This is cute. Do you ever seen the Shabbat lamp? Have you ever seen that?
The Shabulb.
Well, so there's
The
a
Shabbat.
there's a
She knew it.
Shabbat lamp, which is like the light stays on, but you turn a thing and it covers it. But then there's also a bulb now that you can buy that.
Oh my God, it's a light that you can turn on and off on Shabbat.
Yeah.
Oh
So,
my
yeah.
God.
Yeah, no, I took it out.
So one version is a whole lamp called the Shabbat lamp
This is my, I
that,
guess, this is the newest.
that you like. What it has basically, it's made out of metal, and so it doesn't burn, and it has a bulb that stays on. It's like a fluorescent or a LED, and you turn it, and what it does is it turns the outside so that it is either opening up. It's not turning it on or off. The bulb is staying on, but this is actually just a bulb that you put in a regular lamp, and it's called the Shabulb. Yeah, it's a lot of modern inventions around Shabbat. And the way it works is you put it in your regular lamp. I suppose you could just leave it in there all week. And obviously, if you leave the lamp switch on, and then inside it's got a cover. And if you move this, it opens and closes the light. And like when you open it, it's a regular light, and when you close it, it's totally dark. It's got some kind of cover inside that opens and closes, like I don't know.
Wouldn't leave it in all week because it's expensive.
Yeah, it is expensive. Shabbat lamp might be cheaper on that, but
I don't know that you need to understand.
The
anybody
other
have more questions for Sarah? If not, she's gonna go.
Yeah, the other question, I
Right,
had two more
perfect.
questions,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yeah,
What do you do for the third meal?
good question. See how-
You should ask him, not me, because I usually don't eat the third meal like I'm
Yeah,
supposed to.
so yeah, one should, so it's best to wash your hands and eat bread for the third meal. So it's a serious meal. I can take over.
Well, okay.
Or you can stay.
No,
Either way.
I'll go. Here, you
But
can.
you
have the
shouldn't even
cupcakes.
feel obligated.
Yeah, since I don't eat
Yeah.
the third meal, I better go.
So obviously it's best to eat bread. The Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says that if you're too full for that, you could eat fruit or something. You just eat something as a meal for a third meal to honor Shabbat. Because Shabbat, you should have 3 meals. In the old days, I mean, we eat 3 meals every day, but in the old days they only eat 2 meals. So therefore, you have 3 meals on Shabbat. Now, on a practical level, what do you do? So the reality is that people usually eat things that are cold for the third meal. I mean, if you come to Shul, there's a third meal between Mincha, the afternoon prayer, and Arvit, the night prayer. And it's funny, we always serve the same thing, which is egg salad, tuna salad, vegetables, bread, and cake. And like the people, and it used to be much bigger, the third meal in Shul, before COVID, and now it's a little smaller, but so there's 15 young professionals that come to it. And so they were making fun of it. They're like, no one's ever thought of any other third meal, Sudash Lishit. In Hebrew, you say Sudash Lishit, the third meal. Sometimes in Yiddish, people say Shalosh Shudas. which is sort of a bastardization of 3 meals in Hebrew. But they're like, how come no one's ever thought of eating anything else besides, tuna and egg salad, So I don't know. Jews in Eastern Europe probably ate, herring and challah, but in theory, you could eat anything. It turns out it's easier to eat something cold. But if you have your plot on, you could heat things up. That's it has less food. It's not like Friday night or Shabbat day. In fact, there's a sense that the third meal is considered very holy, the holiest of the meals, and therefore it has less food. But it should be a time rather of singing Shabbat songs and speaking words of Torah. In fact, there are some Hasidim that do not eat food at the third meal. They only speak words of Torah and sing songs. Typically, the Lubavitchers often do not. Chabad often does not eat food. It's halachically questionable because if you look in the Code of Jewish Law, it says you should eat food at the third meal. But typically, third meals are smaller. And it's obviously on Shabbat. It should be sometime in the afternoon on Shabbat.
Maybe this is off topic, but if it's halakhically questionable and it says that you should be eating food, why are they not eating food?
Oh, so you could probably read about these. So Hasidim, in Jewish thought, there's a bit of tension at times between Jewish law and Jewish mysticism. Not very often, but this might be an example. And do you side on the side of Jewish law or Jewish mysticism is partly the difference between Hasidim and non-Hasidim. Now, when Hasidim first started, people were very wary of them, and they were excommunicated. And I'm talking about the late 1700s. I mean, it was a very, there was a great fear that maybe this is going to be like, a sort of sectarian movement. And Hasidim became more, they're considered a mainstream part of the observant world. But there are certain things that a Hasidic Jew does, follows sometimes more Kabbalistic path. So that's probably what it is. Yeah, they probably have I'm sure if you ask them, probably have halachic something to rely on, maybe also. But I'm sure they do. But yeah, so it's but people typically don't eat a lot of it. Sidash Tishit or Shabashudis. Yeah. A lot of times when especially if the days are long, synagogues will have it there. No, the days are short. Synagogue will have it there. If not, yes, Sophie.
Thank you. I would just have a very practical and quite silly question about Shabbat and about the Eruv. In the case when there is not an Eruv, I was wondering how one can, or well, in theory he cannot, but bring a tissue, because it happened to me like in other cities, especially in European cities where there aren't Eruv.
Yeah.
That during winter, it's really something.
Yeah.
useful.
So I mean, I guess if you had, if you wore something decorative, a disposable tissue would probably be hard, but if you had some kind of handkerchief that was decorative, maybe that would work because it's clothing.
Okay.
We are finishing the Arlington Eruv this week. So in case somebody lives in Arlington. But that's a bit of a dilemma. When I was in India, disposable paper products were only invented 100 years ago. Somehow people, I don't know. I don't know. Google around, see if anybody's found a solution. You'd have to somehow. You could somehow, if you had I know it sounds a little gross, but if you had some kind of something you could wear, that.
Because I saw that there were tissues, but made especially for men, not really for women. So.
Tissues.
Yeah, some tissues, especially like decorative, like for not necessarily for Shabbat, but I think like they were decorative or for the pockets, where at least I read something about that, but they were for men. So I mean,
in theory, if you had a decorative handkerchief in your pocket, there are handkerchiefs that men use in suits that are decorative, and you could wear that without an Eruv because that's no different than wearing jewelry. Now, if it also served the purpose of blowing your nose, I suppose that would be maybe okay. I have to give that some thought. It's a hard
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
Since we mentioned the Erev, just wondering about the Roslyn Erev, and then I just want, is the Roslyn Erev going to be connected to
Yeah.
the DC?
Yeah, so I met with the police chief of Arlington today. I had to rent the city of the county of Arlington because it has to be, an Erev has three parts. It has to have a fence, it has to, or a series of doorways. It has to have some food in the Eruv that in theory belongs to everybody, that everybody has access to. There's now a box of matzah at the Chabad in Arlington. That is for the Eruv that I set aside today. And it has to be also owned by one person. So somebody has to rent the whole area of the Eruv for the purposes of the Eruv, which I did today with the police chief and talked to the county manager about it. His name is Mark Schwartz. And they talked to their lawyers to make sure I wasn't going to take over Arlington. And so, I gave him $1. I can show you a video of it. And I said, for the purposes on behalf of the Jews of Arlington and Alexandria, I did it with Alexandria, I did with the police chief there. I said, with this $1, I'm going to rent for 99 years the county of Arlington for purposes of the Eruv. And the police chief took it and said he was going to give it to the policeman's the Policeman's Charity Society. I'm like, oh, that'll help. So, that should be done in about a week.
And so that answers my other question, but I just
and so that's going to be linked to the DC. It links to the DC Erev because of the Key Bridge. So you can walk
it
over.
can go over water because someone was like, "Oh, I thought an Erev can't go over water." I didn't.
No,
know.
it can go over water. It's better in some ways. It could be that maybe the Memorial Bridge is also in the Erev. Probably. Basically, what it does is the fences on the side of the bridge form part of the Erev.
Sure, it won't be above the bridge. It'll be like running.
Yeah, the bridge itself, and under the bridge would not be.
Yes.
But on the bridge would be.
Got it.
In other words, the water is not really in the Erev, but the bridge is. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Well, have a good week. Oh, by the way, next week and the week after, next Monday and the Monday after, I'm going to be away. Next Monday, I have something, and then the Monday after, I'm going to be away, and then after that,
If any of you guys want to come to Masora on Mondays, since we don't have class.
Oh, where are they doing it?
So they're doing it
In the new
near
place?
6th and I, but the new place is in about a month. Or Teitelbaum says in about a
A
month.
lot of people want to go. If a lot of people want to go to Masora, we could change our night. And I could teach Tuesday nights instead of Monday nights.
I personally would love that because I leave Masora halfway through to get both. But I don't.
What do you learn there? What's the learning there?
So there's 2 classes. Bucksbaum teaches one, and then there's like 30 minutes for sushi pizza, free. It's great. There's some socializing, and then Teitelbaum will teach a class. Bucksbaum was teaching, I think, teachings from Rabbi
Nachman?
Yes, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov.
Breslov.
Yeah, so he was teaching, there's like a 5-part series of stories from his teachings, and then Teitelbaum, I usually miss his, but I got to do it this Monday because we didn't have class, and this one was on basically like anger and like.
I mean, if people that's every Monday?
Every Monday from
7
if
people want to go, there's not so many classes downtown. If people want to go, I don't mind moving to Tuesday or Wednesday.
I'll leave it up to the class. Just because I'm only one person, but I would love that. And
so if you would like me to move class because of Masora, let me know. Send me an email.
Okay. I'll shoot an email to the class and see. And if you guys haven't come, it'd be great. It's really fun. All right. I'll stop talking.
Terrific.
All
Have
right.
a good night.
This was very helpful.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye.